Okay, I'm the administrator, but you have to. I'm just a spoke in the wheel, and the work you can do is only as good as the people you have on your staff. So I want to acknowledge the other staff members. Brent's our botanist. We kind of have a team approach down there now. Brent's a botanist. We have Tyler, that's our avian ecologist. I do everything from change light bulbs to go to RAC meetings and get yelled at. Alyssa is our fisheries person. Then Lindsay is our staff assistant that keeps all of us straight and allows us to do our work in the field. Okay, there we go. Right now we're kind of concentrating our efforts in what we call the FWC Northwest Priority Area, and it didn't really start off that way. It started off in 2000. We didn't really formalize this until a few years ago. And the approach was that, at that point in time, you heard Tim allude to earlier, when I started, we were a relatively small agency, and we had the talent, but our time, staff, and treasure money wasn't quite there. So what we did was pick an area of the lake where we could get into with equipment, get into access, and over a period of years, concentrate our effort and actually make a difference in that area. And I want to say that as of this week, this area has expanded by 16,000 acres. We're also picking up everything from Indian Prairie to Harney Pond Canal, where we'd be the primary manager. Some names you're going to be hearing today, I'll be mentioning a couple times, is Ten Ounce Cove Slough, the First Point Scrape Site, the Ten Ounce Cove Scrape Site, and then these are the 6 islands we did when the water was down in 2001. One of the things I never thought I'd be doing when I came to Florida and Okeechobee was having to restore habitat in the largest lake in the state. I remember thinking, how can we mess up something that big? Well, we did. By the High Lake Management Schedule that was developed in '78 and really started having an impact in the '90s, we had these organic ridges that were forming primarily in the Northwest Marsh area. And these were forming on the littoral edge. And basically what had happened is all of our plant communities have been scoured out and it's piled up in these ridges. And these ridges were anywhere from 10 to 100 feet wide and 3 to 4 feet deep. So we had the managed recession to try to help benefit the marsh communities and littoral edge in 2000 with projected being a wet season. And, as good as we are, we went into a record drought. So it gave us the opportunity to get heavy equipment on the ground, do some work. Okay, we got in 2000, did some work, and I'm going to get into that in a second, but something hadn't happened in Lake Okeechobee in a long time, as we hadn't had the hurricanes. The top photo, you'll see it's September 2003. The lake was at 17 feet. We had the managed recession, and if you heard Steve Rockwood talk over the years about your moist soil plant management, you need to ground expose periodically. We got marsh recovery, but guess what happened? The hurricanes of '04, Gene and Francis. This damage you're seeing here in the 2005 photo, this was before we even had Wilma on top of that. To give you an idea of how the water moves in that lake, with Hurricane Gene, the difference in the lake elevation between the north end and the south end was 16 feet. So that's why the Corps is real concerned about where we are right now on Lake Okeechobee. I'm kind of going to run through a little bit of history here of what we've done in this area, and then kind of get into a little bit of where we're going to in the future. In 2001, with the water was down, we took out about 7 miles, this organic ridge. We created these 6 islands. We did a test block right in here. It's really interesting how the organics build up on Okeechobee. They're not all the way to the levee. There's about a half-mile wide band where the wind has piled this up. There's mineral soil behind it and mineral soil in front of it. This is our '01 work. The water was back up, looking years out ahead where we wanted to be working. We began to go in and do some cattail treatments in these areas. As preparatory work, you see this was a more current photo from Google Earth, but you see where we were going in prepping where we're going to be do work. These areas were worked on in '07 and '08. Again, in '05, we did some more large-scale cattail treatments. when you have the nutrient loads we have, it seems we're, cattail is one of the primary plants we fight a lot. In the back end here, Buckhead, we were doing some test treatments in coordination with our at that point in time, our invasive plant staff with different formulations of imazapyr and glyphosate. 06, we continued again looking forward. There's a historical slough that runs. The Kissimmee River used to historically come in here, and Kings Bar was a delta of that, and there's a slough that moves down through here. This is Ten House Cove Slough. And opening up this slough is one of my long-term bucket list projects that I want to try to get completed. 07, 08, here we go. You got to have everything ready. You got to have your permits in hand. You got to have your project plans laid out. The water goes down. We scraped this block out here, several hundred acres. We deposited material on existing island. We took out the remainder of the berm in the Pierce Canal to the Cody's Cove area, big blocks. This material here was all trucked out and deposited at the Corps of Engineers spoil site at Yankee Point. Also in cooperation with Water Management, we pulled the permits and did the design. They had the money. We began working south of Indian Prairie Canal down to the Worm Cove area. Took part of the berm out in 07, and then we finished doing some scraping in Worm Cove, hauled that material out. In 08, doesn't look like we did much, but you'll see some little green dots pop up where we started doing some real intense plantings, trying to figure out what would work on a revegetation standpoint in Okeechobee, particularly more intense work on these islands, trying to turn these into good usable wildlife habitat. In 2010, those that are familiar with the lake know the Pierce Canal. It's a canal that doesn't belong to anybody. It was dredged prior to the permitting, primarily for the community here. They side cast the mineral soil material. We took a half mile of that out, trucked it out down the levee over here to the the Yankee Point spoil site to try to restore hydrologic connection in this slough. We also, based on the information we gained on our two primary islands, we came in with bulldozers and resloped Ten House Cove Island. But the big thing that happened that year, you see this green line. This is the year that we basically became the primary responsibility for all aquatic plant control activities in this area, including water hyacinths and water lettuce. Well, the Corps, their focus is to reduce the densities of the floating exotic plants. Our focus is more on habitat management. Now, sometimes it requires that we do that and to protect our habitat sites in a little more intense manner. Instead of hitting it all at once, we have to hit the plants 2 or 3 times. But we also became the primary. And what happened this week, we also are now the primary from Indian Prairie Canal to Harney Pond. 11-12, we began working again. This is Kings Bar, reducing these huge stands of Phragmites. This is the common reed and torpedo grass treatments here. And this year we continued with our cattail treatments, trying to continue to open up and get flow going through this Ten House Cove Slough area. But you can see by doing a little bit over a period of time, we've actually been able to pull all these little pieces together and have a greater impact in this area than if we did something here and then went 20 miles away and did something else. I want to use the Ten House Cove scrape site kind of as an example. We had taken the berm out in 01. This was the organic band that was behind it. This was where we had sprayed. We had everything ready to go in 07, 08 when the water was down. We came in, took out the organics. The way we manage our contractors is if they're hauling anything other than organics, they're doing it out of their own pocket. You know, they come in and they're paid to go down and haul a certain amount of material out to the bottom. So when they hit that sand level, if they're hauling sand, it's coming out of their pocket. And they don't like spending money out of their pocket. But this is where our seed bank is. We're finding our seed banks have been laying here in excess of 40 years before they germinate. You can see up here, I was going to show up or not, but you kind of see how there's a transition where you start getting this area here where the vegetation changes. This is where we're getting into the torpedo grass, and pretty much that's a good indicator to us on the Okeechobee where you see the cattail, you have the organics. When the torpedo grass starts, it's the sand. And this is the front side of that where the wave energy would typically hit. So the levee is miles back in here. So the entire lake bottom is not covered by organic sediments. Like a lot of our projects, we go in, we scrape them, add water. These beautiful spike rush communities, the seed bank was there. We don't have the financial resource, the state doesn't have the financial resources to go in and do the restoration on the level that we're getting this lake through the natural hydro period and just being selectively remove these materials. Now, we just don't go in and arbitrarily pick a side. Over the years, I've watched how the water moves in and out of the marsh, how there's low spots, and we concentrate on those. Of course, now I have staff that has a lot better technical skills than we had at that time. We use LiDAR data and Trimble GPSs and stuff that they don't let me touch because I just mess it up. Get the water back in, we start seeing the birds. I mean, almost immediately, because in this transition band that's there, the rest of the marsh there is really thick and grown up. You can see on the edge here how thick this vegetation is. Again, you can see the pigweed and stuff where we didn't work. You can see one of the project sites here. This was a photo a couple years ago when the water was just coming up in the fall. These blue-winged teal were beautiful. I remember I sent these to Newton, and he put them on the website, and some of the local boys got all upset because he was giving away their hunting holes. So he got some threats over that. The first point site is the same way, same process. We leave the little willow heads, the habitat diversity, and this was last fall. I mean, just beautiful. And these seed banks are there. They're just waiting to get some material off of them and germinate. The spoil islands. The spoil islands are one of those things that causes a little bit of controversy with the permitting agency. So when I had to almost get on my knees and beg to let us do the project in 01, that we would take these islands once we create them and try to create them into some type of usable habitat. These islands are created out of the muck material that's there because it's just too lengthy to transport it out. And there's 3 islands right here. You know, this one's called Buckhead, that one's called Fox, because that's where I go hang out because my cell phone don't work there. And this is 10 House Cove. It's all about planning. So we didn't make them as steep as you may see in some of the other systems, but we still had some issues once we started trying to manage them. First off, we did some plantings on the edge, and when you have 16 foot of water from hurricanes goes over, it has a tendency to not do very well on your plantings. And they also got very dry on top, which I thought was very puzzling. You know, I'm a Tennessee boy, and I'm used to growing stuff, and I can grow things. So we put aerometers at 6, 18, and 36 inches, and what we found out is the water doesn't perk down in those islands, it sheet flows off, which was kind of interesting. Also, the first planting we did, I planted too soon and go out there and everything's just dying automatically. So I bought a 3-foot thermometer, and something I hadn't thought about was that all this organic material in the vegetation had to compost. At 3 foot, it was 130 degrees, so we were cooking the first plants we put out. I said it's been a learning process. Rabbits. I mean, when you go out there and the marsh rabbits are eating the saw palmetto to the ground, and they're climbing over your cages, they're carrying tin snips, I guess. And then, you know, the vines, once you do get some trees established, it's all been a learning process, but one of the most problematic things is that we don't really have a unique soil profile to deal with. You see the shovel here, and you see these holes, how close they are, and here we have mineral soil, here we have mineral soil, here we have a mixture, here we have organic. Trying to deal with that and get plants to live, it was very, very problematic. But we learned. This was, we started mass plantings in 2010 on Fox Island. Brent got a hold of LiDAR data, and we developed planting contours using certain plants at certain elevations, trying to guess what the lake level is going to be. This area in here is extremely dry on that particular island. We actually have scrub plants out there. We have Chapman oak, myrtle oak, gopher apple. And it's kind of interesting. You can go from less than 100 yards, you go from a cypress pond apple to a scrub habitat. To get around the water issue, we now use a water-absorbing copolymer. And this copolymer, to give you an idea, a 12-ounce can can grab and hold 5 gallons of water. And that's how we got around. You go out there and a lot of effort. It's been a learning experience on that island. But we figured out what was going on, and we went operational with it. That was 2010. This is this particular island just a few weeks ago. You know, we had the oaks producing acorns, and there's all kind of the South Florida slash pine. Most species are both the varieties of the scrub oaks or saw palmetto. Brought in a few different plants, things like fiddlewood and the necklace pod, firebush, coontie. Just trying to restore as much of what we would think a tree line type habitat would be. These islands are several miles out from the levee. We're operational with what we learned particularly on Fox Island. Well, 10 Ounce Cove Island, the front side of it was a little bit too steep. You see the contours from our surveys. We decided we wanted to flatten that out and try to catch the water. Water was our big issue. Not right now, but a couple years ago it was. So our engineer designed up the plans. We put a 4-to-1 slope, designed a 4-to-1 slope from 4 to 18 foot, flat topped it. And with the rain we're getting now, we're actually having a water pond on top of 10 Ounce Cove Island. The water was down in 2010, came in, put a couple bulldozers out there, flat topped it. We planted it in brown top and Sudan grass to stabilize it. And then we did a preparatory burn before we planted in 2012. On Buckhead Ridge Island and 10 Ounce Cove Island, we planted 2,700 trees and shrubs each. And how you get them out there, it was still not conducive to get them out there with swamp buggies, so you take them out there about 100 plants, an airboat loaded at a time. Part of our follow-up on monitoring what's going on 10 Ounce Cove Island is Brent went out with the Trimble unit, and we mapped all the trees, their exact location, and the species, and we could follow this through time to see what kind of success we're getting into this type of format. Aerial treatment of cattail and phragmites. The only way we can do enough on Okeechobee, moving around too much? Okay. I told you I wonder. Is to large-scale aerial treatments. I know a lot of people have a lot of contention with this type of technique. But the way we control our processes is we plan, we map, and then applicator management. We actually go out and map the areas well ahead of time where we're planning on doing treatments. And you see here they're zoned out by various acreages. These are stored in what's called shape files. These shape files are provided to the contractor, whether we choose to do it by airboat or whether we do it by aerial application. We then go back and pull the records out of their machines to see where they worked. This is the airboat, and where they sprayed. These lines will be a little bit more evident here on another slide, but these lines are where they're actually spraying and the trigger is on. Areas like we have right here, these little gaps, is where they weren't spraying because there was bulrush there, or in the interior it will be cattail or be willowheads. One of the things we have done on our formulation in Okeechobee is we've removed 2,4-D. Most of the time we're spraying cattail, we're using about 80 ounces of glyphosate and about 16 ounces of imazapyr. What we're finding consistently year to year is by doing our treatments in the spring is we're able to drop out these dense cattails and not impact the bulrush. We're finding that this is just wasn't a fluke. You know, first time it happens, you're a fluke, you wonder if it happened, but we're seeing this consistently. But this is our treatments also that was conducted this year, where we're also seeing similar results with plants like the pickerelweed, and again, more of the bulrush. So we've got a technique in Okeechobee we're using that's been very beneficial for us. We're able to drop out a problematic plant, the cattail, and leave the more desirables. What I hear quite often is when we do these cattail treatments, why don't you just burn it? Trust me, I love to burn. Wally Kitchens once called me the only fisheries guy he knew to carry a pocket that carried matches in his pocket. But sometimes it don't work out. 2 years ago, the week that we got 3 foot of water in the lake in 14 days, I had 12,000 air ignition devices show up at the office. You know, timing is everything. So it doesn't work, but there are other considerations. We have done burns on the lake before, extensive burns. Corps will come in, it's a multi-agency process. Corps will come in, cut the fire lines. We hand fire off the levee. Once it gets a little bit away from the levee, we turn the helicopter loose. But in Okeechobee, you just don't start a fire and shut it down. When you burn, once you get it going, it's going to go, it's gone. You don't get out there and shut it down. We'll burn thousands. We've actually burnt 16,000 acres in 6.5 hours before using the helicopter. And the fuel loads are they're fine fuel loads, and they burn hot. And you can see this is in our priority area. We have miles of front. We just couldn't go out there and shut that down if something doesn't go right. So everything's got to be perfect. And here's the thing that I fear the most. This was the 91 burn. Thousands of people live here, most of them elderly. This is the Buckhead Ridge Locks. That's this side here. There's a rim canal. Those familiar with the lake, we have a rim canal inside and outside of the levee here, so we can't hand light it. We were burning this 2,600 acre block. We did used our smoke bombs. Smoke dispersed beautifully. All of a sudden, you're standing there, and these grass fires are very thick, black smoke and organics. Goes up, doing beautifully, and then it starts to curl. You talk about a knot in your stomach. Well, only thing we could, but that's all it did that day. The only thing we could determine is that we're burning early enough in the day that, you know, the lake is so large and you have the land mass there. It's like being with the ocean. It generates its own weather. And that day-night shift, we were still getting enough morning updraft because of the water being warmer than the land. This was February coming off the lake. We've had just a little bit of curl coming off the lake. But that's all it did. And other than that moment, this was an easy burn because we just turned the helicopter loose and he was done. Talk a little bit about how we monitor what we do on the lake. This is the Buckhead Ridge Island kind of example. We're building a database over a long period of time that we can keep track of what's going on. Something happened to that slide. These are the individual helicopter paths. This is where we took the berm out in 2001, did test plantings of a bulrush here, and we planted the island itself. What we're doing down there is building up a GIS system where in the future, those that follow can actually go to certain sites and see what we're doing and the chemical formulations we used, and hopefully learn from what's going on here. A new component we've added to the Okeechobee project is we're getting more into the avian work. One of my bucket lists, there are two areas of the lake that are actually Audubon sanctuaries. One of my, again, one of my bucket list projects is to get a better understanding of how how important Lake Okeechobee is, just not on a regional basis or a state basis, but on a continental basis, the bird populations. And I'm hoping this will give us more leverage in the future to manage Okeechobee properly to benefit the ecological processes that are there. This is our avian biologist now, Tyler Beck. He was assisting with they're putting a transmitter on a snail kite there that we'll get into in just a second. Why birds? Well, birds are real good indicators. They'll quickly go in and move new types of habitat. By looking where the birds go, if there's not the good forage that's there, if things aren't quite right, the birds aren't going to be there. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted to try to develop some data on additional bird species. Primarily, we're going to concentrate on shorebirds and the neotropical migrants of passerines. There's good information about, from the banding data, this was from Tyler, some stuff he got for me, from the banding data where, band recoveries, where the birds were banding coming to Florida. One of the things that we're doing is we're going to be banding these other kind of species too. Another bird we're working with a lot lately is the snell kites. We finally got snell kites back on Okeechobee in 2010. And this year we had the largest nesting population in the state. So we do a lot of work with snell kites. A lot of that work involves coordinating our aquatic plant crews. This was where Brent, the botanist, was meeting with the service and Zach Welch, our snell kite person, to coordinate the snell kite treatment where all these intensive snell kite nests are. This is the nest concentration that's in our Northwest Marsh area this year. In the priority area, you'll see here. The interesting point, I like to say, I like to take credit for it, but we can't, is kites until 2010, even when Jim Rogers did all his work, had never been documented nesting in this area. But primarily, they're responding to where these exotic snails are coming in. And this is the use of our first point scrape site, showing that one of the birds where Tyler had helped put a transmitter in, and you can see these birds are really concentrating in the areas where we're working in, which kind of indicates to me we're doing something right. On the islands, Tyler's has been banding some of the passerines that come through, and until you get out there and kind of looking around, it's amazing the amount of different species of birds that are using these islands. Remember, these islands are miles out in the lake. And hopefully these birds are going to travel back to other areas, travel back north. We'll get some report back data and start developing some information on how important these are on a continental basis. Things like Connecticut warbler, and of course our painted bunting, and I think it's a Cape May warbler. And over a period of years, I'm always picking up dead birds when I find them. I picked up a black skimmer that was banded in New Jersey, and a brown pelican got hit by the Kissimmee River Bridge. And I don't know how a pelican gets hit on a bridge unless it's flying too low. But this brown pelican was banded in North Carolina. Wading birds, we're really concentrating on some of the wading birds in the lake because the birds really respond to what's going on with the lake level, and that's what I need is additional data to help manage the lake levels. The graphic on the right, this is water management information, shows that the amount of the marsh that is exposed at certain elevations. And you'll see in Okeechobee, there's a big change from 13 to 12 feet on the number of as far as the marsh that's dry, and that it's 6 inches. Now this is important just not for the wading birds. Again, getting back into Steve's multiple presentations over the year, you need that moist soil habitat. We need that marsh exposed periodically to allow these plants to germinate. This year we initiated aerial flights. Tyler flies every 2 weeks, October through June. Again, these are the transects that he flies. We also do Paradise Run, but going across our habitat areas, we also had already included the area down to Harney Pond. And what we're looking for is of course, looking for the birds. You see concentration of birds. They take the people in the helicopter, staff in the helicopter takes GPS coordinates, enumerates the birds. And these are some results this year from 2 different lake elevations. You see here we're in the upper 14s, here about 13.5. And you can see as the bird populations begin moving to the lake as the foraging depth is adequate. Now what happened this year, you see we didn't even get the birds really coming to the lake till May and June. And what happened this year, we did not have a very good nesting population for colonial nesters on the lake because the water levels just weren't correct. Future projects. As I mentioned, we'd already worked south of Indian Prairie. This is a project we've had funded, we've had permitted, we've had it ready to go twice. It rained. You see how this meshes in with work that we've already done. Again, I want to touch on a little bit how we pick where we do these areas. You look at some of these features, we don't pick them arbitrarily. We kind of call this Indian Prairie Slough for lack of any other name, but it's a true feature on the lake. This photo is from 1957. This was an area that for some reason it's lower in there. You can see the little drain off here. This is where the project site. This was an aerial photo from 2007 where we'd already taken part of the berm out. You can see the drainage. But this is a feature that actually existed prior to the levee being there. We try to concentrate on these areas. One of the things we're doing now as part of our QA/QC to evaluate our projects is we have the project site and we have a control site. And we go in, staff conducts fisheries work, do vegetation samples. Tyler goes out in the morning and does bird surveys. And this is the fun part, where they get to go out and play in the mud and the mosquitoes and get lost in the vegetation. We also use the marsh fish data to coordinate with where we're seeing the wading birds. Another one of my bucket list projects, I mentioned the Ten House Cove Slough, is completing this project here. It's about 200 acres. It's about 250,000 cubic yards of material to go ahead and open up the rest of this slough. A project that's on the books this year, flip a coin on whether it's going to happen or not, is the removal of the remainder of the Pierce Canal berm from our half-mile site out to the end. This is kind of what it looks like now. This is a half-mile section we took out. We take it out down to the grade elevation there, not impacting navigation in the channel at all. It's funny, if they just dredge this out, then all of a sudden we go through and work, and the rumors, it's amazing how the rumor mill starts flying, that we're shoving the dirt back in the canal and filling it in, and anyway. This material will be trucked out and deposited over here at the Yankee Point spool site. And as far as a vote of confidence of what we're doing, I think this is about as good as it gets. This is a young snail kite.